This is Gemara Baba Basra Daf Pei Zayin and rolling in the bottom of Pei Vav and Beis. We'll learn of this month. The month of Elul has been generously sponsored by a close friend of the Daf as Chos Alias Neshama for Aster Rizal Basra Meir B'Siyata Dishmaya. The learning the entire Chabura Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam should bring Aster Rizal Basra Meir to higher and higher place in Gan Eden Shalmaila, closer to the Kisei HaKavod. We're holding on the bottom of Peivav Amid Beis, and we're in the middle of discussing a din of Rav and Shmuel. We're going to go up about a few lines just to get a running start over here. Rav Shmuel Da'amri Tarvayu. We're about 10 lines from the bottom. The Gemara just disappeared. I apologize. Let's just get it back over here. Rav Shmuel Da'amri Tarvayu. That there's a difference in l'shaynais when one is selling something. If he says kor b'shleishim ani meichelacha, then yachal achzer by even b'sel sa'achreina. But kor b'shleishim sa b'sel ani meichelacha, then rishain kaina. So the difference between kor b'shleishim or kor b'shleishim sa b'sela, the latter being that each and every item is an individualized sale and therefore rishain kaina. We started with one kasha, which the Gemara deflected, and now we move on to another. Tashima, 2 lines from the bottom, says the Gemara, trying once again to ask a kasha on this din of Rav and Shmuel. On the last line, someone hires a worker to work for him during the harvest. Every day for a dinner, he gives him a dinner each day for that day's work. We turn over to Pei Zayin Amud Aleph. Continues the Gemara. Ula Gairin. But during the harvest, what's the status of this worker? Yafe Sela. He's worth a Sela per day. So again, he hired him for a dinar per day. But now the value of the worker is worth more. The value really is worth a Sela. What's halacha? Aser lehana yisemenu. The person who hired him is not allowed to benefit from the worker more than he paid. Meaning, he paid him a dinar per day. But no, the value of the worker right now is more. So it's as if he gave the worker a halva, a loan, and now the worker is in essence repaying the loan when he's working. But if you make him work the full day, he's in essence paying back more than he borrowed. Let's just use dollar values to make it simpler. I hire a worker for $5 a day. But now it's high season and his value goes up to $10 a day. So I paid him prior $5. If he were to work the whole day for me, it's as if he's paying me back $10. That's called ribis. So he's only allowed to work the equivalent. In the example I just gave, 5 and 10, it would be half a day because that is the amount that he is worth right now. Haval continues the Brisa. If he hired him to work from today, the day that he signs the contract, which is early, before the harvest season, and then he's going to continue, and he's going to pay him dinner layim. He's going to pay him every day a dinner. And again, during the harvest season asela, then mutter, then it is allowed. Why? Because since he starts working for him right away, therefore it's not considered a halva. So again, in the second case, he's paying him the same dinner per day, but because he started working even before the harvest, he's allowed to continue working for the full day. Again, let's just translate this entire case. If I hire someone for $5 a day, and he starts working for $5 a day, and then comes a point that he's really worth $10 a day. Now he's allowed to continue working the whole day, and it's not like he's paying me back, because since he started working right away, it's not considered that it was a halva, and therefore it's going to be mutter. That is the brisa. So what's the kasha in Rav and Shmuel? The second case, Rav Shmuel, if the mechanics were Rishon Kaineh, then Achanam, even in the second case, Kama, each and every day, Mifsak Pasak should be considered separate, and therefore, therefore should be irrelevant if he started working earlier. It still be considered individualized workings, individualized chiruses, and therefore he should not be allowed to work more. Medinner, also medinner, leyoim, or the garden yafasela mutter. Amai v'hager natalehu. How are you allowed to do the second case? It should be a case of ribis because he's paying you back more than he borrowed. So asks the Gemara if according to Rav and Shmuel, the mechanics are whenever you say dinner l'sel yaim, it's considered kama, kana, rishon, kaina, that each day is separate. So ask the Gemara, so why in the second case over here are we saying that you're allowed to work the full day even though his value went up? My Rava explains 8 lines down. The first one in line is Ava Rava V'Tizbra. And do you really think it's Aser? Zelzule B'Schiras Mi Asar. Are you not allowed to undervalue someone's wages? Meaning, you determine this is what he is worth, and that's the way it is. But says Gemara, 1 second. If you believe what you just said, Maishna Reisha, Maishna Seifa. So in the ratio, why don't we say the same thing, that you just undervalued his work, and even if he did not start working, it should be allowed? Explains the Gemara, Reisha like Ovid Behedya. In the Reisha, since he didn't start working explicitly Mehashta from now, you're right that theoretically you could value the work however you want. However, Mechzi, it appears, it seems, Ki Agar Natarle. Save the Kaveh Behedya Mehashta, La Mechzi Ki Agar Natarle. But in the save, of course, he started working right away, does not have the stigma, therefore will not be Aser, and therefore the din of Rav and Shmuel stand the test of time. Continues the Gemara at the 2 dots, quoting the end of the Mishnah, that if the flax is attached to the ground, as soon as you're talash, you take up any amount of it, there is a kinyan. Asks the Gemara, the talash kol shukana. Is that really true that once you uproot a little bit, you have a kinyan on the whole thing? Amar Rav Sheish Zacham Eskinan, Damar Le Lech Yaflech Karka Kol Shuvkani Kolma. We're talking about a case in the Mishnah that the seller said, go make it a little bit better. Go and work in the land a little bit, and then you'll have a kinyan. And that's the reason why when he works a little bit and he pulls up a little bit of the flax, he has a kinyan on the whole thing. We continue with the next Mishnah. Halfway down, Bezayinim and Aleph. Ha-moicher yayin v'shem lechaver, someone who sells wine and oil to his friend. The hooker, when the value goes up, the value goes down. If it is not yet filled up the measurement, meaning he bought a gallon and he didn't yet fill up the gallon container, then whether it's an appreciation or a depreciation, it goes to the seller. Then and let's say there was a middleman between them. Nishra chavis, nishra lesirser. The barrel breaks, it's the middleman that has to take the loss. And finally, the Mishnah concludes, v'chayiv lahatef lo shalosh tipin. When one is filling up, he has to fill up and let 3 drips out for the buyer. Harachina umitzes. After he lets out the 3 drips, there's going to be a little bit left at the bottom. Hariu shel moicher, that little bit belongs to the seller. But a money changer, a storekeeper, does not have to let out these 3 drips. One is putter from doing this. So this little bit, he's letting out these drips. What's going on is that he has to allow a little bit to drip out even after he finishes pouring. 3 drips to come out of the container. The reason being, you're selling wine, you're selling oil, it sticks to the walls of the container. So the seller has to keep his cup, we'll call it, his bottle, tilted to let 3 drips go out to make sure the buyer gets his requisite amount. Says the Gemara. The first thing in the Mishnah was what? and the value goes up or down. We said it depends if Nismalo is Hamida or not. Asks the Gemara, Hamida de man, whose Mida is it? Whose cup, measuring cup is it? If it's the buyer's, if it didn't fill up entirely, you're going to tell me it goes to the Moicher, but it's the Lokeach's Midah, so why isn't he kind of when it went into his jug? Then we have the Kasha all the way. What do you mean? It's still sitting in the Moicher's measuring cup. So Amar Rav Illa, what are we talking about over here? Midas Sirser. It's the middleman's midah, and therefore we're trying to figure out what is the point that it switches. So the Mishnah is teaching us at the point that it's full. Asks the Gemara of Amnitani Seifa, but for the fact that the end of the Mishnah said, that implies very simply, the Reisha Lav is Sirser, asking another Reisha is not talking about a Sirser. Answers the Gemara, Reisha B'mida B'lai Sirser, Seifa B'Sirser. Atzmai. Says the Gemara, they're both very similar. The Reisha is dealing with the case that the Sirser's cup is used, but the Sirser is not there. Meaning the middleman, you're not using my cup, you're not using the seller or the buyer's cup, you're either using a third party's cup. The Seif is talking about that the third party, the Sirser, is there, and what are the relevant dinim. We continue 5 lines from the bottom. At the 2 dots, Nachamol quoting the Mishnah. After letting out those 3 drops, then whatever's left in the jug goes back to the seller. Says the Gemara, Kisalik Ravelazar, Ashkelaziri. When Rav Elazar went from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael, he met Ziri. Amar le, he said, "In mi kantana deslayu Rav." Midois. Is there a Tana Erzal to Rav taught Alacha Midois? Rav Yitzchak bar Rav Dimi, so he pointed to Rav Yitzchak bar Rav Dimi. Amar le, Rav Yitzchak bar Rav Dimi said to Rav Elazar, Maika kasha lecha. What's your kasha? And now, finally, we get the question. It says Rav Elazar, it's a kasha in our Mishnah, Tana Kiva Mitzis Ariyu Shal Meicher. After filling up the measurement, when he puts his cup back, if there's a little bit left at the bottom of the jug, that goes to the Meicher. So what's the kasha as we turn over to Beis Zayin Amid Beis articulates the Gemara. But what about the fact we learned in the Mishnah, Truma, that if you're pouring oil, wine as Truma, and then afterwards there's some little bit of wine or oil in the bottom of the barrel, said the Mishnah on Truma, Truma, it has the din of Truma. So why there does it have a din of Truma? The Truma it's similar to the buyer, and here it has a din that it goes back to the Meicher. So Amar Lei responds Rav Yitzchak bar Rav Dimi, Ha'itmar Allah, we learned over there Amar Rav Avua Misham Yosh Bailim Naguba. The reason being that in our Mishnah, it's different, is because by us, there's an element of Yush Bailim. We assume that the buyer feels it's not worth his time to waste his time for the last 3 drops, and that's why it goes back to the seller. But in a Chanami, in another case, it would indeed go to the buyer / the Trumais. The Chemini does not have to do this. Asks the Gemara 4 lines down. What din is Rav Yehuda talking about when he concluded the Mishnah? And he said that Erev Shabbos, one is Potter. Is he talking about the Reisha, about letting out the 3 drops, and he's being more makel, you don't have to do that on Erev Shabbos? Or is he talking about a Seifa that the storekeeper does not have to, and therefore he's being more Chamor, he's saying only an Erev Shabbos? Tashmat and Reviewdaim Erev Shabbos if Chashecha Chavini Potter. Why? Mimnei Shechavini Tarat. So we see clearly in the Brayso Rav Yehuda is talking about a special din on Erev Shabbos, and Rav Yehuda is being machmir. Tanikama said the Chavini's always never has to allow these 3 drips, and Rav Yehuda says no, only on Erev Shabbos. Continue with the Mishnah on Beis Zayin Amid Beis. Hashalech has been a Yitzchak Chavini. If someone sends his child to Chavini to buy oil, Umadad Lahi Bi Isur Shemen, and the storekeeper measured an Isser's worth of oil. V'nasan Layis Isser, and he gave the child the Isser. The child paid a larger coin. A Pudyan explains the Rashbam. and he's buying only an Isser, a smaller denomination. So the Cheveni, after filling up the Isser, gives the child change. Shavar es asluches. The child walking home and he broke the flask, broke the container holding the oil. Vavar es Isser, and lost the Isser. What's the halacha? Says the Mishnah, Chenveni chayiv. The Chenveni is liable over here. Whereas Rav Yehuda, Paiter, Rizal, Pater, Shamanas, Kein Shalchu. Rav Yehuda says, no, it's Pater. Why? Because this is the reason that the father sent the child. So we have a debate over here. Very good. A kid shows up to the store. Should the storekeeper go and give him the item and give him change? Or should the storekeeper say, no, what's going on over here? I'm not going to trust the child. That's how the Tani Kama learns. And Rav Yehuda says no. But let's say the child shows up with a flask. Then in that case, even the Chachamim are asking that the Chenveni, the storekeeper, is Potter. Asks the Gemara, I understand that regarding the Isser and the Shemin, what's the Machlekes Tanikam and the Chachamim, the Rabbanan and Rav Yehuda, Rabbanan Savri, Lo Yiduye Shidra. Rabbanan hold that why did the child show up holding a flask? It was to, why did the child show up? Just to tell the storekeeper his father wants to buy it. But the storekeeper should never have sent it home with the child. The child was just there to tell the storekeeper, and then the father would pick up the item. Rav Yehuda Savar, no, l'shaduya le'shidrei. Rav Yehuda held, and no, you know why he's there? He's there to pick up the item. Elo, but ask the Gemara, Shavar stuchis of the aveda midasi. But ask the Gemara, but the flask, that's an aveda midas. If the child shows up holding the flask, so on the oil, on the Isser, I understand the father could say, what are you doing giving my kid that to my kid? I never wanted it to have it. I just want him to tell you that I wanted to buy something. That's what the Chachamim will learn. But asks the Gemara, if the kid shows up holding a flask, why would the storekeeper ever be chayiv for that? In that case, it's Aveda Midas if the father entrusts the child to hold a flask. So Amrav Hoishiacha Bebalabayis Merchastuchios Haskinan, talking about someone who sells flasks, who go into Chemini Amanas Levakra. And we're talking about a case where the Chemini took the flask from the kid to inspect it to see if he wants to purchase it. That is the reason why he's chayiv. So a completely different twist on the whole story. That the reason why the Chemini is chayiv for the flask is because once he takes it from the child to inspect it, he has an obligation on it. Says the Gemara, if what you're saying is true, then this detail of whether you're chayiv for the flask is a machlokes Tanakama Rabbanan versus Rabbi Yehuda. So it comes out that the sin of Shmuel is a point of contention. Ella says the Gemara, no. Rabbi Rav Yosef, 8 lines to the bottom there. Moicher, 1 second. Excuse me. Ella Rabbi Rav Yosef, Darmitavai. Hacha bechenvini. Moicher stuches aslinan. And everyone is going according to their own reasons. The Rav Yehuda says the Chemini is Potter. Same reason he's Potter for the oil and the Isser, because the father clearly wants him to send it back. Whereas the Chachamim say he's Chayiv. Why? Really, you only Chayiv for the oil and the Isser. But once you're going to be Chayiv on that, he'll be chayiv in the flask as well, but not because they're debating the din of Shmuel. But now, after understanding what's going on, the Gemara asks the obvious kasha. It seems that the Gemara is understanding as the Anacham Pshuta that the whole case in the Mishnah is that the kid shows up holding a flask. But it asks the Gemara, Yachim, a safe what at the end of the Mishnah say? 4 lines to the bottom of the Chacham, the Rabbi Deman says, Tuchos bi'ala tinik, but how can you say the Chachamim are Maideh? But you just told me the exact same case, and you just told me that we can learn that the reason why the child comes in holding the flask is just to inform the storekeeper. So why would the Chacham be mighty to Rabbi Yehuda? So Ella, we conclude, Abaya Baravin, Rechlina Baravin, and Ritavayo Acham Eskinan. What's the case over here as we turn over to Peches Amid Aleph? The case is Kochenat Lamud Ba. Talking about a case that yes, the child shows up holding a sluchas. And why did the storekeeper take it from him? It was to measure it. It was to measure and fill it up. Rabba, we're going with the din of Rabba. Dama Rabba, Ikishan is chayiv. Says Rabba that if someone finds a lost item, a lost animal, and he hits it for it to run home, he is chayiv. Meaning, because once you touch the item, you assume liability on it. So too over here in our Mishnah, the Chachamim hold that once the chemini, once the storekeeper takes his flask to look at it for a moment, at that moment he assumes his chayvas for it, and that is the reason why he is chayiv. But we'll conclude with one last kasha. Asked the Gemara, Rabba, when did Rabba say he's did that by hitting your chayiv is about chayim? Why? Tani kitinu nigra b'riyasa. Why? Because when you hit the animal, you're causing it, and then when it doesn't go back home, it's you are the one that did it. But ki gavna miyamar. But in our case, can we say that when the storekeeper takes the flasks, he at some level is chayiv because he touched it? It's not just that you touched the item that you're chayiv. By the animal, you hit it and you caused it to go a certain direction. So then we could say that you're the one that's chayiv. But over here, that's not the case. Stop over here. I'll pick it up from here. B'siyata dishmaya.